In today's episode, I speak to Aaron Huey about what you would live for. He asks, what would you do to become the warrior that has a cause to live for? Aaron reflects on the Bushido, that is the warrior mindset, aligning your life with something greater than yourself. He explains that warriors can be teachers, doctors, anyone who knows their values and wants to serve. Aaron explains that the thing he would die for is the preservation of innocence. It is this cause that has informed his work and his adult life. Listen up to the rest of the conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.
Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is Aaron Huey. Hi, Aaron.
Hello there. Thank you so much, Judith.
I am so looking forward to chatting to you. How are you today?
I am wonderful. I'm in recovery from a bad dog bite on my arm, but I just got back from the gym doing all lower body, so I'm nice and energized and I'm ready to talk.
Wow, well, that we're looking forward to, and bad luck on the dog. Was it your dog or somebody else's dog?
No, my dog started a row with a bigger dog, and that dog tried to finish it, and I got in between them, and it's a friend's dog, and I really like that dog, so it's, as it were, it's all good. They're dogs, and they do what dogs do, and I got between them, so neither of them got hurt. I did, so I'm fine with it.
Okay, that's pretty good then, if you're okay. Well, tell us a bit about you.
Well, a little bit about me. Start back at the beginning. I was abandoned by my biological father. My mom was a phenomenal mother. My bonus dad, who adopted me when I was 4, was spectacular. I began martial arts at 12 years old, and that was around the same time I first tried cannabis. And both of those love affairs grew exponentially over the years. And unfortunately, my love of drugs and cannabis took over as more traumatizing things happened to me, sometimes while I was on drugs, including being sexually assaulted, including in being bullied mercilessly in school. And like I said, at the same time, martial arts was taking me through this life path of risk and healthy risk and adventure. And my parents had the wisdom to send me to Japan where between my 10th and 11th grade year of high school. And it was during that time that and this is unbelievable, but I have pictures to prove it and videotape to keep my memory intact. But while I was in Japan, in the 80s, American ninja movies were really, really popular and ridiculously terrible, but very, very awesome. And while I was there, they took me to a ninja museum, and the curator of the museum was a practitioner of Ninpo Taijutsu, or of the Tugakuri Ryu system. And he pulled me out of the crowd to do demonstrations with, and I was so fascinated by the technique that my remainder of the stay between 15 and 16 years old in Japan, while other kids were home throwing footballs and playing Atari, I was studying with ninjas in Japan. And when I came back from that experience, the beginning of 11th grade, in the first 2 weeks, the bully who had tormented me throughout middle school attacked me in the hallway. And I had one of those quintessential John Hughes teen movie moments where I put the bully down and everybody saw it. And it couldn't have been more wonderfully strategic. Like the goddess herself said, it's your turn. And that moment was a big game changer. However, acting school after high school was when I was sexually assaulted, and Hollywood is Sodom and Gomorrah, by name and by nature. And I fell in to that pillar of salt, as it were. And that led me down a pretty dark path until the age of 28. At the age of 28, I got sober. I started helping children. I opened a martial arts school. I started teaching more and more teenagers. I started running little kids camps, warrior camp, warrior goddess camp. I started becoming a sober coach for teenagers and running teen rites of passage programs. And at one point, mom said to me and my wife, "Can my kid just come live with you guys? I think he'd be better with you guys than he is with me." And that was the beginning of us opening a residential treatment center that unfortunately will close here at the end of September due to horrid insurance gouging practices here in the States. We have been confronted by a demon, and we can't win. And my property insurance has gone from $40,000 a year to $360,000 a year, and it has put us out of business. So we are back to our plan Bs, and that's helping families one at a time, keeping the podcast going. I'm releasing an app, coaching parents through the really tough and dark times with kids. And I travel around the world lecturing on martial arts, the warrior archetype, and martial arts philosophy. And martial arts led me the whole way through. Began at the same time that drugs did. It is still going, even though drugs ended 23 years ago. So that's Aaron in a nutshell. I'm married, 2 adult kids. I love my life.
Wow. That's quite a lot of stuff happening there, Aaron. But first of all,
it's a doozy.
First of all, I'm sorry to hear about the assault, and I guess I'm assuming that that's something that you've come to terms with and moved on from.
I think the only way to come to terms with something like that is to kill the secret, right? Mm-hmm. Trauma takes place in isolation, healing takes place in a community. And that thing that traumatized me, that had me question my own sexuality, that had me question friendship and brotherhood. And here's the real kicker. If you want an insight to my psychology, the man who assaulted me, my best friend, had the same name as my biological father who abandoned me. Like, how much does that tell you how deep this was linked to my past trauma of being loved and being close to somebody who was not willing to be kind? I guess that's the best thing, but to say it. But it took a long time. It took a lot of deep soul searching and sobriety to understand that was not something I asked for, created, or started. And but it's a dragon that flew in and torched my village. And at some point, you have to be audacious enough to summon that warrior part of you, to go travel to that cave of the innermost self and rescue the princess, the innocence, from the shadow. And that's what that story symbolically actually means. But that's what it takes. It takes the king and queen, the left and right prefrontal cortex, to pull out your virtue and say, go get them. Like, face this. What part of you is stronger than the darkness?
Thank you very much for sharing. And I know what you're saying about the best way to heal is to have these things in openness. But again, I just want to thank you for sharing that with me and with the audience.
Well, thank you.
So if we segue then to the Bushido mindset, that warrior mindset. Can you explain for us what you think that is?
Yes. What would you die for? What matters so much? What is so important to you as an individual that you would give your life in defense of it, in protection of it, in perseverance of it? What would you kill for? What matters so much that you as a human being, and we are not inherently bred to kill. That has been proven by science, but we can, if in a moment of passion, either in the shadow or in the light, we find ourselves confronted with an ultimate choice of what matters more than our own freedom, than our own life. And when we discover what that is, a part of us is unlocked. And that is the Bushido. That is the warrior. That is the person that says, I'm willing to sacrifice anything to accomplish this one thing. And when we boil the warrior archetype down to its core and its essence, it has to do with value, what matters, what's important, and service. The word samurai, one who serves, it is about aligning your life with something greater than yourself and having the courage and the discipline and to serve it at all costs, to put your own needs, feelings, beliefs aside, to serve that thing that you have aligned with. I think a lot of religious zealots are warriors. I think soldiers who are truly fighting for their country or fighting for the preservance of peace or freedoms are warriors. I think athletes are warriors, because I think emergency room nurses are warriors. I think teachers are warriors, because these are people who are more interested in the outcome than the income. Right? These are people who have said, you know what matters more than my body, than my family, it's this thing. And that comes from often a wound, a pain, a tears, wreckage of life. And I think the warrior's way is the way of the wound. Like the wound is the way, the pain is the path, the tears are the trail, the wreckage becomes the resume. And that's how a warrior is built, developed, created, is by being shown what's more important than you. And maybe it's God and goddess, maybe it's family, maybe it's kids, but persecution begins when we judge what others believe is the most important thing in their life.
Aaron, it's not often that I am forced into silence there. Because it's like so much resonates with what you're saying. And it's just like, I couldn't agree more, but the way that you have said it has made my brain's running in all these different cycles. Tell me, what would you die for? What would you die for?
My children. My wife. Beyond that, beyond this family thing, beyond this family, preserving innocence, because that's what I lost. That's my wound. Being a child, being an innocent child, being loved by a father, a biological father, embraced, touched by a biological father, losing a friend to that friend's own shadow and darkness, and them persecuting me through their shadow of darkness. When the dragon takes the princess and the warrior rescues, that is not a story about a man rescuing a woman from a monster. It's a story about the self rescuing the self from the externalized shadow, from the reptilian brain, from the limbic brain. What I would die for has led me to a success. And this is what I want people to know, especially people who listen to this and feel that pull and drive of the warrior's way. I want people to understand this very clearly. There are people in this world who would die and kill for money, but that's not how a warrior becomes financially free, or financially successful. If I can look at my son and my daughter and say, I would die for them, I would kill for them and never apologize. If they were in danger, I would sacrifice everything to protect them, right? And what mother, what connected present father does not experience that emotion when they're holding their innocent child, or they're breastfeeding and look down into the child's eyes and the child is connecting and feeding, and who doesn't feel like if the house was on fire, there are not enough firefighters in the world to hold me back from rescuing you. So if you could say, I would kill, I would die for my children, then the question just becomes, okay, great. Those are pretty extreme. So let's think of something less extreme. Would you become financially free for them? Well, yeah, that part should be easy. I mean, if you're willing to kill and die, wouldn't you be willing to experience freedom with your child, be willing to travel and provide them as many opportunities as possible? What wouldn't you be willing to do? If you're willing to die, would you be willing to live presently, fully connected, supportive, conscious, aware, awake? All these other things in life suddenly get clear when that one question gets answered. If you wouldn't die for it, what are you doing connecting your life to it? If it doesn't matter so much, your work, what are you doing here? It's part about what I love about podcasting, about what I love about working with families and teenagers and children who are struggling, is this is in line with the mission of preserving innocence, of helping people fight their dragons. And I'm willing to die for my dragons and my children's dragons and to my wife's dragons. I'm willing to confront anything. So God, teach that philosophy. Again, that's the way. That's the way of saying, this is what's important to me, and now I'm going to go release it onto the world.
Wow. Because I was thinking about that, thinking, it's like you don't want to live in a world that innocence isn't preserved. And I was just trying to think about what's my thing. And the first thing that came to my head was justice. But but not in that kind of vengeful, you need to kill someone who's done that. So I don't think justice is quite right, but I guess I am going to ponder about this afterwards and really have a good thing, because it's something about, for me, the greater good being served. It's something around that would be my dragon to slay, because it's something around doing no harm. It's something, I don't know. I am going to go away and think about this quite deeply, actually. So thank you very much for that. I just absolutely love it. So I've always thought of the Bushido mindset being something around greater good, doing no harm, or at least the least amount of harm as possible, sort of justice, nobility, a sense of self-control, that kind of thing. And I think all good leaders have that mindset that I am doing something that is bigger than myself, and if need be, I sacrifice myself for that greater good. And that sacrifice doesn't, as you said, doesn't need to be a dramatic thing. It might be, I won't take the credit for this, I'll let Aaron take the credit for this because he needs it more than I do. It doesn't, it doesn't necessarily have to be, or it could be this Aaron, Aaron's reacting in this weird, strange way. I wonder if he's okay, as opposed to I need to stop, I need to stop that or change that. It's like looking behind. I guess it's a bit like walking down the street and there's a homeless person and not thinking it's your own fault you're homeless, but thinking, looking at them with compassion and thinking, what can I do to help, but not to condemn.
And Judith, that's where it begins, is when you look around and you say, Would I march for homeless? Would I march for vets? Would I march for justice? Would I march for orphans? Would I march for dogs? Would I march for children? And then one of them goes, oh yeah, you do that. Because I'll tell you, I do this work with children and teens and adults and families, and it is my day in and my day out. But behind the scenes, I buy all the food for a wolf sanctuary. Because if it wasn't going to be children and their families, it's going to be dogs and wolves. Is it because there's an innocence there, right? What humans have perpetrated onto dogs in this world, and getting there's something that needs, and I can't tell you why that's the one, because certainly cancer is huge, and the environment is massive, and that's the thing about being a warrior, and that is what I believe the Bushido allows us to embrace, is that we as warriors cannot condemn or judge what other warriors have decided to align their lives and strength with. Nobody thinks they're on the wrong side. Nobody believes that they're on the wrong side of history, right? So you can't say you're bad for fighting for that thing. What we can say is, you're fighting for that thing, I'm fighting for this thing. We disagree, but I see your fight and I see your strength and I acknowledge you as a warrior. In the United States, there's a statue called Brother to Brother, and it is it's commemorating experiences during the Civil War where Freemasons on the battlefield, when they were wounded, could throw up their secret hand signals, and other Freemasons could recognize them and then go and be with them as they passed over into the evergreen. And in Freemasonry, we talk about this a lot. I'm a 32nd degree Freemason. And this experience of having the North versus the South, the brother to brother statue is a Northern soldier holding a Southern soldier who's in death. And at the end, there's a recognition that we are all brothers. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita is also about, that he's there on the battlefield and he looks out and he recognizes that everyone out there is a brother and they are warriors. So the Bushido is a neutral concept, because what you think is good and right, I might disagree with, because right now in America, we are so divided with what's real and right and true. And it is coming to blows on a daily basis. And the hardest thing about this is no one thinks they're wrong. And everybody's got an army behind them going, no, I agree with you. They're wrong. And no, this is just the battle. And the battle is a neutral experience. And we're going to see who wins. I believe justice will win. I believe equality will win. It has to. We cannot sustain, but that's the side I fight on.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because I think for me, conceptually, I agree with you 100%, but I think there are some things, and this could be just my biases, but I think there's some things that you can respect the humanity of the person in front of you who's fighting their cause, whatever that is you don't agree with. But some causes are, I guess for me, one of my biggest things is that it's got to be in the greater good. So if I see something that doesn't fit the greater good, not on an objective basis, then I don't get it. Do you know what I mean? I don't respect the fight. It's not the same as not respecting the individual, but I don't respect the fight. And if I pick an old one, let's say slavery, for example, it provided some good for some people, but in terms of the greater good, it did not serve. So for me, that cause was another good one.
It is, first of all, I want to acknowledge that I truly believe in my heart that no white person can understand the privilege that they, as a global minority, have possessed. And as a Black woman, I could never say to you, oh, I understand what you're talking about. I might know that you're talking about something that's important, but I could never feel what you have felt and experienced in your life. What I can do is I can acknowledge it. I can fight by your side because I happen to agree with what you are saying. But I also have to look at what's going on in my country, because when all this started, the fact that all this came to light, that it's been going on for hundreds of years, this inherent racism, this is inherent inequality, this global minority of white men deciding that we are still going to remain in power at all costs, that is a warrior concept, that the self shall perpetrate upon others because they believe it so strongly that they would die for it. Well, that is what I'm seeing happening. And I would love to be able to say this is not who we are, but that's not accurate. This is who we are. We are still people. I still belong to a culture of white men who believe that they think they know what's best for everybody. And it's absurd. It's ridiculous. And I am watching men fight and want to die and threaten to kill to preserve it. And the global majority stands back and looks at this white male culture going, what is wrong with you? How could you possibly continue to hold this way of thinking? It's archaic.
But, you know what? Thank you for that. I think what's interesting is like now, I love talking to you, by the way, Aaron, because I have written a ton of notes, which you can't see, but is that for me, there's a difference between the warrior mindset and a martial arts mindset. Because having studied a few martial arts, at the core, certainly the Japanese ones, which I know better, but you know, similar to Chinese and others, but there's a core of a greater good that is being served within that martial arts, whether it's Aikido, Judo, Ninjutsu, Nimpo, whatever it is, there is still this kind of greater good mentality, which is not necessarily served in a warrior mentality. Do you see what I mean? I see a slight, so I can see like how martial arts can lead, like a follower of martial arts and understanding the ancient knowledge of martial arts. I think almost every system follows a greater good principle. You can see how that would work to great leadership. Whereas a warrior mindset, if you think about war in the global bigger sense, could lead to a negative part of leadership, because it might be like a mercenary would be a warrior, but I wouldn't necessarily see a mercenary from having a martial arts mindset. Do you see what I mean?
I do. And I think part of the martial arts fantasy that we perpetrate and perpetuate, which I do as well, consciously, I might add, is the myth of nobility, because that is what we're supposed to be taught. But remember that ultimately, again, history is written by the conquerors, and the history of martial arts is written by the superior martial artists. So there will always be an edge and a bent that if I believe as a samurai that this master that I serve, because I have dedicated my life in service of this master, if I believe in what being a samurai means, and I hold true to that Bushido code, whether it's the Hagakure or whether it's whatever, and this guy starts perpetuating takeovers of local villages, justified in his mind, I am the person sent out to accomplish his goals. The individualized morality of the warrior, I believe, is a much more modern concept. Warriors historically, that's what they did, and I'm talking about the Wudang, I'm talking about the Shaolin, the ninja, the samurai, the Sofa of Korea. These were the Hurangdo warriors of Korea. These were people who their entire lives from the age of birth was dedicated to the martial arts and learning every aspect of those martial arts. Then that had to go somewhere, because otherwise you were a mercenary. Otherwise, you were
rogue samurai or something.
Yeah, the rogue samurais, the Ronin. But the moment you aligned with a philosophy, agreed or not, you took a side. And go ahead.
See, whilst he was talking, I was right. A thought came to my head, which was and I've never thought this before. So again, thank you for this conversation. Is leadership is a philosophy we choose to believe. So like I do my things about maverick leadership, it's all about who you are and what you do, and it's greater good, and it has a kind of a moralistic heart to what you do, I guess, without the judgment. I mean, in terms of internally. And I actually talk about maverick leadership being a philosophy, but I haven't really. But you're right, because so like when I look at martial arts, I choose to believe, and I totally understand because I've looked at the historical nature of it, but I choose to believe that within studying martial arts, you can become a better, more centered individual that cares about those that are around you. So like the principles of a few of the martial arts would be, I don't know, you're being attacked, you take down someone, but you take that person down with the least amount of physical pain to the other person.
Right.
So you're not out there to go break a bone. If you can hold their arm and they don't move, then holding their arm is what you do. So it's like the least amount of harm possible is what you're trying to do. And I guess for me, that's what so I take the challenge. That's what I choose to see. I choose to see martial arts as a way of centering, a way of responding and not reacting. And for that belief, that I'm just thinking out loud, to be sustained, means I see true martial artists in that way too. And then I can see the benefit for leadership. But you're right, it can be seen in a different way. I've not really considered that before.
My first martial arts instructor, Sensei Stevens, was ex-military, screamed at us, called us all kinds of names, made us do push-ups till our hands bled and jumping jacks till our feet bled, kicked us harder than we kicked him, punched us harder than we punched him. And it was my very first experience. Now, two things came of that. Number one, I hated him. Number two, I kept going back because there was something there in that risk and in that brutality and dark energy that he possessed that made me go, I can handle more than I'm handling. In life, not just in his class. And he's teaching me to be stronger. He's teaching me to deal with more. He's teaching me to deal with discomfort in such a way that I keep going and find my success. So I found that value, hated him as a teacher. Grandmaster Hatsumi, he writes in one of his books, I'm not teaching you to fight. I'm teaching you how to control evil. And so my attraction to the ninja, who were very much fighting for whoever paid them. And in fact, often fighting for both sides. So, they were very much just on their own side. Oh, you're going to pay me to kill him? Great, I'll do it. Hey, this guy paid me to kill you. How much are you going to pay me? Great. Now I'm making money on both sides. I'm going to kill them both or not. Just, they really, and that's where their dishonor came from, where if the samurai said they were going to do it, it was done. It was done at all costs. But which one is morality? Isn't it all morality? Isn't it all authentic? I choose Sansu Kung Fu as a martial art that allows me the greatest sense of freedom, safety, power, connection, and worth. And Sansu Kung Fu is a bodyguard style that if someone throws a punch, I paralyze the arm, I break the leg, and I hit him in stomach 9 or spleen 15 and drop him to the floor. 3 moves or less, very devastating martial art. And that's what I've been teaching for the past 15 years. And what I have found through that experience is that my students don't fight. But if I ever go into that sparring, fencing, facing off, they want to constantly battle each other. And so at the end of the day, I think what we're dealing with is individual personality. If you give a jackass $1 million, he's going to be a rich jackass. If you give a kind man $1 million, he's going to be a rich kind man. Martial arts, I feel, is a very neutral concept of personal power. Who are you giving the power to, and who are you learning power from? Because who you learn this power from is going to taint how you embrace the power itself. But at the end, it's just power.
Aaron, you know what? It goes back to my thoughts on maverick leadership, in the sense that you can't delegate accountability, right? So if somebody says, I did it because it was my job, yeah, but you still need to live with the consequences. Yes. So you're still even if you're not doing something, you have to live with the consequences, even if you had no choice, though. Do you know what I mean? Yes. You can't go, well, I won't feel regret because I did it because it was my job, because you're still accountable. And the idea of again, I hadn't really thought about this before. I guess I've had a very kind of one-sided view on martial arts, I suppose, is that it is neutral in the same way that leadership is neutral, because we've seen bad leaders and we see the cults. We're very careful here, but we've seen people who don't lead well. If your viewpoint is leadership is for the greater good, if your viewpoint is leadership is control, some of the leaders that we have seen are really good. If that's your thing, I want this really dominant, controlling, aggressive force, and that's what a leader is. That would be the very person I would say is the worst leader possible. But that's from a bit like what you were saying. That's from my viewpoint, as opposed to a neutral point of view.
Finding a martial artist to teach yourself, or to teach your children, or to share classes with your loved ones and friends, finding an instructor, I think anybody who's listening, who's thinking about changing classes, take the time to find a martial arts instructor, truly vet who is telling your children how to punch and when to punch and why to punch. Because since I began studying, and I've studied shorenji, I've studied Japanese jiu-jitsu, tang sudo, ninjutsu, sansu kung fu, and the latter two, ninjutsu and sansu kung fu, are generally considered the shadow arts, that these are the ones where it was assassination and devastation and quick moves and secrecy and deceit and lies, which are part of the Bushido. And deception is one of the keys to the art of war. But you have hit it, Judith, when you say it's the end, because the means are neutral. But what is the end? The end is never neutral, and it's never chaos. There is no such true definition of chaos in this world, because everything has an end result. And end result means it's not chaos. It's been going somewhere. Consciously or unconsciously, you've created an end result. So if you're going to choose an instructor and just say, well, this class looks good and it's close to my thing, you don't know who is teaching your child when and why to hit. And so it's not empowering. It's just hitting until you find the philosophy of the instructor. I'm currently working with the United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame to develop a course, a certification course for instructors to teach children with trauma. And I have martial artists from all over the world helping with the ideas and the tools and the tactics. I have therapists that have worked for me and psychiatrists who have worked for me that I'm using as interviews to talk about how trauma affects the body and affects the brain, how to work with a kid who has depression and anxiety because they were traumatized or raped or abused or abandoned. And what we're finding is we're developing this course is that, my God, how do we find a way to make sure that these instructors who are learning this because they want to be leaders in their community by providing more than other martial arts schools more, thereby increasing their bottom line, their financial profiting up of teaching something that they love, which is all good. how do we make sure that they have the philosophy of hope and the philosophy of recovery and the philosophy of forgiveness and the philosophy of light? Because these are children. And then our next course we're doing with the Hall of Fame is for women. These are people who have been subjugated to abuse. How do you, because in my opinion, you cannot enter into the shadow without understanding forgiveness. I have had to forgive in my life, and it's not for the people who hurt me. It's for Aaron to forgive. And the way of the warrior is the way of understanding. It's the way of knowledge. It's Carlos Castaneda said, the warrior is hooked into infinity while everybody else is just hooked into their fellow man. And when you're hooked, when the martial artist is hooked into infinity, that you can see beyond this moment of this experience, this trauma of yesterday is not your detriment of tomorrow. Tomorrow is up to you. And martial arts, this is why when I wanted to talk to you, martial arts creates audacity. The who dares wins, the thrill of personal belief, the audacious understanding that I think I have superpowers. You know how, you look at Scooby-Doo and these teenagers who solve crimes. That's so audacious of a concept. And I say Scooby-Doo because we were talking about the cartoon before we went on the air, but this audacity of leadership to be a good person means that you've had the audacity to forgive those who have trespassed and hurt you, to look at your enemy and say, I understand why you are fighting on the side that you're fighting for. But unfortunately, that puts us at odds on the battlefield. So here we go. But understanding, consciousness about what we're doing as warriors, as martial arts is required, because if you're unconscious and you're a martial artist, if you are unconscious and you're a warrior, you're not either. You're a barbarian. You're a berserker. And in the Norse mythology, never once was a berserker a hero. Not once. Barbarians are not heroes. Conan did more destruction than reparation for his wounded, abused childhood. Berserkers, barbarians is the shadow side of the warrior, of the martial artist. The light side is the samurai, the knight, provided once again, if we align with the morality of what they've aligned with. So it's subjective.
It's amazing. Thank you for that. I think we've probably reached an end. Do you have a tip for somebody who wanted to improve their leadership through understanding or sort of learning martial arts?
What martial arts gave me that has made me an effective leader, that has facilitated audacity, the who dares wins, is the results of discipline. As my life recently has been shaken by a dragon that is too big for me to fight. And it's not my fight. That's not the hill. Insurance companies are not the hill I'm going to die on. My battle is in the trenches with families whose children have OD'd, run away, attempted suicide, won't leave the house because of video games or anxiety. That's my fight. That's where that's the hill I'll die on. But the leadership, the audacity, the results of discipline, of doing the same thing every day means that you have built a foundation that you can rely on even when the world becomes shaky. The global pandemic forced me back to my roots to say, all right, if the people I love can't breathe on me nor touch me, what do I have left? If the world in large is afraid to breathe, like that is the very threat to our survival as human beings. So what can I rely on if I can't rely on what's happening out that window? What are your daily habits and routines? And for me, it's the gym, it's listening to affirmations, it's turning on a rock tumbler with my favorite music and distracting my brain from its distractions, and building my new business plan as I move into the next phase of my life. But these foundations of self-care, Are you drinking water? Are you moving your body? Are you sleeping? Are you eating healthy food? And are you breathing on purpose?
Brilliant.
That's the results of discipline. And that's what martial arts gives you, is a practice of discipline, and you don't have to think about it. And remember, we begin martial arts with the end in mind. The end is also supposed to be, you don't have to think about it. That's the mushin that the samurai embraced. No mind. That you can protect yourself and protect your loved ones, be strong, and you don't have to think about it. You know the pattern, you know the form, you know the placement of the punch and the blocking hand and the placement of your feet, bow stance, horse stance, because you've done it so many times, you don't have to think about it anymore. That's what you will rely on when the world goes insane and is afraid to breathe, is your discipline. Leaders have good discipline.
Brilliant. That is a great place to end. I cannot say anything else. Thank you so much, Aaron, for coming on board and sharing that with us. Would you come back again?
Anytime. As you can tell, I hate talking, so you're going to have to twist my arm. Okay, I'm in. Anytime.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith.
Thank you once again for tuning in to the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Aaron as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. To find out more, contact us at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you.
The Maverick Paradox. Judith Germain is an author, speaker, consultant, mentor, and trainer, and the leading authority on Maverick leadership. She is the founder of the Maverick Paradox, which supports organizations to enhance their leadership capabilities and to help business owners develop and grow their businesses. Judith enables individuals, business owners, and organizations to improve their impact and influence. She is also HR Zone's leadership columnist, an international online radio host, and her expert opinion has appeared in national, international, and trade press.